All right. So yes, go ahead. Homework.
Okay, so I will repeat that for the sake of the recording. As I was looking through the prototypes that have been sent in so far, we really want to make sure that you're capturing that user interaction. So let's say they arrive at your website and they need to click on, they need to book something, for instance. Maybe they're booking a consultation with you. Is that in the menu? Is there a button on the page? Where do you actually press? And then what happens next? What appears? Is it a screen with a calendar? And if it is, do you show the available dates? And then the available dates show you different services that are possible. Or if a document needs to pop up, how do you close out that document? Do you press a little X in the corner? Is that how you get it to close out? So just really think about how that user is interacting with it on a very specific level.
Thank you, Kate. I hear you saying details.
Yes.
Yeah. You really, with the prototyping, even though it's something super fun, you still want to think about it as if this was my site and a user is stepping through. We've all dealt with super frustrating sites where a pop-up will pop up and you can't figure out how to close it. That's because someone's like, well, I made it look cool. Okay, that's nice. How do I get out of it? Like, I got it. I read the pop-up. How do I move past this to actually interact? There's been times where I literally just avoided a page because I couldn't navigate it, right? And so you want to be able to, if you're like with prototyping, you can prototype different aspects of your website or your app or whatever tool or even service or process. If once you prototype those different pieces, if you're prototyping the check-in or registering for service or buying a product, go through the whole motion of it, right? And think about where are the gaps, because the moment you can start to identify those gaps, then you can start to see how do you fill in the needs of your users. And so be that user where your process is seamless, because people will pay even more for a product if the process is seamless versus a service or a product where I feel like I got to jump through so many hoops and I can't figure out how to navigate, right? So you want your navigation to be as intuitive as possible so that your user knows how to get the task completed. So if the task is them to sign up for a newsletter, to download a service, to go through your products, pick out one, pay for it, right? Think about all the steps from beginning to end, right, of your product or service, and see your users going through that. And that's why you test, because if you're holding this up to someone and you're not giving them information, they're like, okay, now what? That now what is a test, is a hey to you, like, oh wait, I'm not making that clear here. So your user should be able to step through it without having to ask you a question or you having to navigate any of it, right? And so anytime you have to explain something, then you know there's something missing. There's a gap in your prototype that you need to address. You had a question, Lisa?
And my mentor last week, I had changed something on my website and I said, could you take a look at this? So we sat there and it wasn't not even 2 minutes. That's generous. And she's like, you lost me. I can't, I'm not reading all that shit. I'm not right. Excuse me. And so that was eye-opening. So yeah, and you're right. Yeah. I saw where
you have been living, breathing your product service for how long? So a lot of it is intuitive. And it's kind of like sometimes reading, like sometimes
she said, you know what you're talking about. I don't know what all this.
So sometimes when you're reading out loud, you catch things that your brain fills in the blank when you're kind of reading to yourself. It's the same thing. You've been living, breathing your product and service. So your brain is filling in the blanks. Of course, there's an X here. Of course, this is how you navigate to this part. But your user has not been on this journey with you, right? And so you want to bring them on this journey very seamlessly. And the more people you can test and get that feedback from, that's, again, this is the same thing about the empathy. The more people you can talk to and get the feedback, the more ways you know where the gaps, right? And even if the process is seamless, ask them questions, right? Because they'd be like, this is cool, but if it had this, that'd be even better, right? And you can't meet all of the needs, but listen, because there might be some things that spark off some thoughts for you. Does that help a little? Awesome. A couple more housekeeping things. I heard you guys are having some really interesting sessions with Sonia. One thing to mention, if you cancel your session with Sonia within 24 hours, we're charged for that session. if we're charged for that session, that's one less session you have with her, right? So just keep that in mind. She kind of gave us a warning on with someone recently, but for future reference, out of your 5 sessions, if you cancel within 24 hours, that still counts towards one of your 5 sessions. I think that was any other housekeeping, Katie, that I forgot?
So ideally, it would really help us out if you guys tried to submit your assignments by noon the day of class. That way it gives us a chance to kind of see where everyone's at. You guys are holding on to them, and it's okay to let it go so that we can give you feedback and that they can get better and better. It's an iterative process. We will always say that. And so, yeah, just if you can get it to us by noon, that gives us a chance to really see where we're at and plan for class as well. So I
Can I
think
ask a
that's,
quick question?
of course.
So I guess part of the trouble I'm having is by that time I've done something, but I'm not really happy with it. I know you're saying not to be a perfectionist about it, but can I submit something again and get feedback on it? Because I kind of don't want to, I feel like I'm asking multiple times for the same item, if that makes sense.
So what you can do, Keisha, is if you want, for me, just say, I mean, it can even be something as simple as sending a direct message the day of what you're not quite happy with yet, and just say,
Okay.
this is where I'm at, still working, hold off on feedback.
Okay.
And then submit like the final thing, but that will give me so much more information. So that would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Kind of like a combo approach.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, we just have we're kind of working blind, especially since we're virtual. We have no way of telling what's happening with you guys. So without you submitting, we don't know if you're stuck. We don't know if you just haven't gotten around to it because you're busy. We don't know. We just don't know what's happening. So just constant communication with us. Let us know, okay, I'm good, but I'm refining, or I'm not good, or I've just been so busy, I haven't gotten to it. Just let us know so that we know kind of, all right, like, does this person need additional support, or they're working on it still, right? Like, we're just trying to, this is how we stay in the loop of, again, like sometimes you'd be like, okay, I didn't get to it today, but I'll get it to it next time. And then 2 weeks later, you're like 2 weeks behind, and we don't know that, right? And so that's kind of what we're trying to avoid. Other questions? All right, let's get this party started. Let me share my screen. All righty. So for the past, can you guys believe this is like week 7? Is that crazy? Yeah, I thought about it when we were looking at the calendar today. I was like, yo, like something must be off. Did I miss a week? And I went back and I'm counting like, oh no, this is like legit week 7. So we got to pick up the pace. The holidays put us a little bit behind schedule. So some of these is going to feel like I'm talking fast and throwing that a lot at you. Slow me down at any time. Speed me up. If it feels like I know this already and I don't need it, let me know. Like, your communication will gauge, your communication and your assignments is how I gauge like how much I need to throw at you and how much I need to pull back, right? You'll still get the same information. We just kind of, we'll figure out how to get it to you in the best spacings of it. So when we started this class, we talked about the 2 fundamental concepts are design thinking and lean startup. We briefly introduced the concepts when we started. It turned into 6 weeks. It was supposed to be 5. It's been on design thinking. We talked about design thinking as a way of solving hard problems and finding the best solutions for our clients and customers. We talked about the 5. We talked about an experience. We talked about the 5 components of design thinking, and we've worked through the first 4. So empathy, developing a deep understanding of challenges, define, clearly articulating the problems we want to solve, ideate, brainstorm potential solutions, and selecting and developing our solutions, prototype, designing a prototype or series of prototypes to test all or part of our solutions, and testing. We have done a little bit of testing. Every time you go out there and talk to people, that is part of your testing. So actually, we actually have gone through all 5 parts of the prototyping if you have started testing with your prototype. And so these are the main components of design thinking that we have gone through. Design thinking answers the questions of what and why. It gives us the a vision. It helps us understand the vision. Helps us identify the how, right? So it gives us kind of all these pieces of what's going on. Why does it matter? How can we solve it, right? And so we discover, define, develop, and deliver during the design thinking process. But moving into lean startup, why do we even care about lean startup? Lean startup is just because we have a concept doesn't mean we have a business. And that is something you'll hear me say over and over again. You can have the coolest innovation idea, right? Doesn't mean you have a business. It just means you have a cool idea, right? You have an informed hypothesis to build a business upon, right? And that is very different. That is something I always have to drive in. Your business is not your product. Your product is not your business. Your business has a product. And the reason why this isn't so important, some people spend all their effort developing one or the other. So it's like, oh, I'm going to put all my effort in making sure I have the top-notch product, but not the business. And so if you have a product and you don't know why it's important to people, and you have a product and you don't know how you're going to make money, you don't have a business. And you have a business that's lights and shiny, but you're not actually solving a problem or a need, you have a very expensive hobby, right? And so this is why this distinction between the two is very important. So the goal of Lean Startup is to find a product market fit by moving a minimum value product through the build, measure, lean feedback loop. And so you take the product that we've been working on, this innovative idea that we've been working on for the past 6 weeks now, and you now take it through the build, measure, learn. And so we wrapped up the tail end on our build. So our prototyping was our first rough pass of that build. And we measure by talking to people, getting that input. We learn from that input. And then we learn, do we need to pivot or persevere, right? If you need to pivot, you do another build, you do another measure, and you learn. And you can go through this loop over and over and over again until it makes sense, right? Until we reach a point where our customers are saying the things that we need to hear to know that it's okay to persevere. If startup companies invest their time into iteratively building products or services to meet the needs of early customers, they can reduce the market risk and sidestep the need for large amounts of initial product funding or project funding and expensive product launches and failures. One of the things that I often get asked when coming through this is, are you going to help me do a business plan? We don't necessarily do a business plan, a traditional business plan in this class. What we do is a business model. And the lean startup, lean business model, lean canvas process focuses on a model more so than a plan, for a couple of different reasons. The model focuses more on hypothesis driven than implementation driven. Oftentimes, if you're writing out a plan, there are about 30 different pages of things that need to happen, and you haven't tested them. So you're putting stuff in that you're not exactly sure on. The model, as you're kind of creating each one of them, you're testing it, right? And that doesn't mean you can't create a business plan. I often say the business model is the predecessor to a plan. Think of it as you have a PowerPoint presentation where you have the bullets, right? And then after that, from that PowerPoint presentation, you're going to now write a 30-page paper. That PowerPoint presentation is almost like the outline that lets you know what you want to focus on each aspect of that paper. It's very similar, but not just do you have those bullet points, but you have it fleshed out and you have it tested out piece by piece. So it's not so overwhelming. It doesn't feel so daunting, right? And so you're going through and you're testing out the strategy, your new product process, right? You're doing that by testing it on people, that build, measure, learn process. You're building your product iteratively, right? So you start off with the paper, your stick figures, no, don't like that, ball it up, toss it out. Do some more stick figures. Okay, cool. This one sounds right. All right, cool. Now do some pictures, some moving pictures, right? Do a paper prototype where they can actually interact, a functional prototype test, right? And now you're building up, right? And so now with all of this, you're learning each step of the way what your customer truly needs and what they're willing and how their problem space, right? From how they truly see it. The lean startup allows you, it happens very quickly, right? So you can iteratively test pieces without spending $1 more, or spending a lot of time. So I mentioned like the design thinking and the pieces of that, lean startup, build, measure, learn. Oftentimes when you think about them together is when we enter the prototype testing phase, this is when we go into that build, measure, learn. So you can kind of see that how they come together, where we spent time focusing on the problem space, and we're now doing a deeper dive on that solution space. Design thinking offers a great guidance on uncovering human needs and identifying the right problem, Lean Startup provides a framework for systematically validating our solutions hypothesis in fast loops in an integrative approach. Any questions so far?
I think I have a question.
Okay.
Is, to me, my MVP for the service business that I do would be my website. Is that, I mean, am I on the right track with that? I'm thinking of really cool things I could show and add though to enhance the experience of that, but it's all about getting them through that to want to get to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And even though you have an existing website, it is still an MVP to test ground all the different features that you want to add on. So you can kind of do some of that. And as you grow your MVP, because you think about, there's a lot of service businesses. If, for example, Uber is a service business, right? But you can kind of see the level that has grown to versus where it started, right? And so just because it's a service business, even if it's more hands-on and interactive, it still can have a lot of different moving components in terms of what its growth capacity. And so all the things during that ideation stage that we dreamed up that could possibly be, this is where you say, okay, my MVP is kind of a, bare bones start of that, where I can start to test some of those theories. And the ones that people really hook onto, those I know are key pieces that I should be adding on to my existing businesses.
Right, like the kid in the video with all the paper foldouts, that was the shizzle, that was the stuff.
Yeah, but it was really just kind of testing all the possible realms of
Yeah,
possibilities,
that's
right?
a lot of detail,
Because
but
you think
okay,
about,
thank you. Yeah,
well, think about all those different foldouts. If you paid a developer to build all of that out, how much money you would spend to then realize more than half of that is thrown away. And people are like, yeah, I didn't really care about that, right?
crap it.
For you, it took maybe an hour in front of your, favorite TV show, drawing it out and whatever, right? And so it gives you a way to really test and get people's feedback on what is essential and valuable and what they can do without.
Right, as you build and pivot. Okay, thank you.
All right, so we're gonna do, so the next 4 weeks, yes, including this week, we're gonna dive heavy into the Lean Startup and building out our business pieces. And so we'll have some speakers that'll come in and talk to you through these different pieces. And some of the Lean Canvas will be overlaid with just kind of some business one-on-one things, because what we have found, for example, Business Canvas talks a lot about like your revenue model. But I found that if you don't understand business financials, and then you can't really come up with that revenue model quite accurately. And so like that cost and structure as well. And so we'll talk a little bit more about those things. Some of the pieces like marketing is not a piece that they talk about in the business model canvas per se, but it is a piece in terms of what are those channels? How are you connecting with your customers? How are you getting your resources to them? How are you getting information to and from, right? And so we do a lot of that deeper dive in terms of as we bring in supplemental speakers to kind of, and mentors to help support you through those. And so I'm just kind of mentioning that. So today is going to be a fast, high crash course on some of this. We're going to talk about the business model canvas. We're going to talk about just kind of some business one-on-one stuff. And a lot of these things we're going to dive in deeper over the next couple of weeks. I'm just kind of throwing them at you now. So it's going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hydrant. That's okay. We'll be having a deeper dive. If we reach a point that's like, hey, we talked about this, but not at the depth that I really need an understanding, just always let me know and we can do more. Cool? All right, so we're going to come back to the business model canvas in a second, and I want to just talk to you about some really basic business stuff. Because this is what I find is some people go through business model canvas like, okay, yeah, I'm doing the business model canvas, but it's hard to really understand why it's important and how it really helps you develop your business. And so I've started to front end it with, let's talk about business one-on-one stuff, and then go into the business model canvas so you can kind of see how it helps you figure out these pieces that really just feel overwhelming because you just don't know. Ready, set, launch? Let's dive in. So some key points, right? Always make a plan. More to start at business than articles of incorporation. I can't tell you how many people come to me and be like, yes, I have a business. I've incorporated. What else have you had? Nothing. What else have you done? Nothing. But I've incorporated. So I have an LLC. I can't tell you how many times I go to Mixer networking events and people are so proud that they have an LLC and do absolutely nothing else. That is a wonderful start, but there's so much more to do, right? Be kind to yourself. We talk about this a lot in this program, right? They're going through these processes. You're learning as you're going. It's okay to admit what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? And so be kind to yourself and give yourself grace to learn. Use all of your resources, and we'll talk about this a lot through the class. There's so many resources at your disposal, especially as a woman or minority founder in the state of Florida. There are a lot of resources at your disposal. You might have to beat down a couple of doors, and you might have to ring a couple of phones, but there are so many resources that are available to you, and a lot of them are free. So don't be afraid to ask for help. So when you think about the planning process, have an agenda. Assessing personal and business needs. Remember, we talked about this at the beginning of class. You're not building your business in a vacuum. So think about what you got going on personally and what your business needs and got going on, and balance the two. The importance of a business model and understanding the business plan components, right? So in terms of assessing yourself, right? Do you have kids? Do you have savings? Is your spouse employed? Do you have, what do you do with your free time? Are you accustomed to working long hours? Are you a morning or a night person? Know thyself, and to thyself be true, right? Because if you have this plan, I'm gonna wake up at 4 a.m. every morning to work on my business before I go to work, and you know good and well you cannot function till 9 a.m. Don't lie to yourself, right? Know yourself, right? If you know you want to wake up at 4, but your kids wake up at 3:30 and they right there, don't do it to yourself. Understand your life and how the things that come into it and how that play and how you can build your business around. The structure of your business, right? And this is just a limited list, right? Is it just you? Do you have a partner? Do you want to be S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC? All these different things are things that you want to start to think about, like how are you going to structure your business if you are now launching? Other things to consider, selecting a business name. We'll talk more about this later. This is always tricky because everybody wants to name their business after themselves. Like everyone wants to see their name in lights. But you want to think about how you're gonna, and we'll talk about this later, but when it's time to exit your business, a lot of people want to die with their business. It's gonna go to the grave with me, or I'm gonna hand it on to my kids. Who says your kids want your business? Right? You want to think about an exit strategy. Normally your first idea isn't your only idea, but if you have an exit strategy and you work backwards, right? You want to think about, am I going to sell this business to the highest bidder and move on to the next great thing? The problem is if your business is your name, then that name goes with that business, right? Think about Famous Amos Cookies. He can never use his name Amos in any other cookie ever again because it now belongs to the brand that he sold, right? So always think about that business name. And sometimes we love to get creative, right? Like, I saw this name in a historical magazine, but now no one can remember or pronounce my business name, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, sorry, I'll go down that rabbit hole for a long time. Business identification numbers, licenses, permits, taxes, accounting, all these different things to make your business real. I'm actually I love hiring minority and women contractors to do work that we do. And I can't tell you how many times I struggle because their business isn't set up properly. They don't have a bank account for their business, or they don't have the accounting system or the correct business IRS numbers or whatever for their business. And I'm not talking about a lot of major things. A lot of these things are free and easy to do. You just actually have to put the time to set them up, right? And so when I talked about those things you can put in your calendar, 30-minute increments, these are some of the things you can start to kind of tackle in setting up your business. Business assistant areas, marketing, advertising, sales, tax knowledge, insurance. Think about what your business is and think about what you're really great at your business. And then think about what you're not. The not list, think about how you can outsource it. And it might not be at the very beginning, but you need to know that list because your business needs you to be your best in the areas you shine in. Not you bad at numbers trying to become, your accountant for your business. That doesn't do your business any favors, right? And as soon as you start making some money, you have a clear idea of this is what I'm outsourcing and this is what I'm outsourcing, right? Other business assistance areas, business finance, presentation skills, communication skills, legal aspects, banking services. I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell an entrepreneur, your idea is great, it's fabulous, but you can't be the face of your company. Like your people skills ain't gonna do you no favors, right? Like just like understand who you are, right? And if you need to bring on a partner just to, do the song and dance for your company, do that, right? Just be okay with getting out of your own way. All these things are things we have to think about as we build our business. As I talked about some of the different services, I love to put this slide up. IRS, get that those numbers, Florida Department of Revenue, the chamber. I put in Gainesville Chamber, that's just because where we are, but your local chamber, even if you're not a member of the chamber, they normally have so many free classes and programs going on, workshops, whatever. Jump on all of that. official state of Florida, Sunbiz, so you can incorporate. SBA has a host of resources that you can leverage from SCORE, etc. I'm sorry, I see Inessa's question. Inessa, did I miss your question earlier?
No, when you mentioned insurance and things that we people should think about having in place, I was just under the impression that LLCs didn't need insurance. But
oh, I wasn't saying specifically. I was just kind of listing all the things.
Sorry. Okay.
No, you're good. So the collaboratory, us, we're here. The Seed Center is just an incubator space that we have here. So look up your local incubator space. Sometimes you can start off with a PO box, you can start off with an incubator space, but sometimes it's best to separate our business from our home residence, depending upon what works better for you. Even if you do business at your home, having another address because a lot of people are really uncomfortable about putting their home mailing address on their websites or their business correspondence. And so to kind of think about what those places are, Enterprise Florida, Black Innovation Alliance, there's just a list of resources that are out there. This is a very short list of examples of innovation, of innovative entities, or sorry, entrepreneurship supportive entities that already exist. All right, so I got a newsflash for you. Ready for it? It's hard. Did you know that? Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. 76% of small business owners feel overwhelmed with the number of technologies available to run their business. And that's just the technologies available. We're not even going to talk about all the other things, right? So the thing is, I love to tell people that there is a host of tools you can use to make your one-person business feel like a 20-person business. But sometimes filtering through all of that can feel like a task in itself. So you want to kind of lay out, what does my business do? What does my business need to be doing? And who are the pieces? So there's a book, I'm drawing a blank, E-Myth, that talks about writing out all the jobs for your business, right? So if your business, you say you have your CEO, your CFO, if there's a board, if there's a president, if there's an accountant, whatever the roles are that makes your business run efficiently, even if it's just you right now, write out all those roles. Because as your business grow and as your resources grow, and you get people sometimes be like, how can I help? That used to be one of my biggest pet peeves when I was starting my company. I always got people asking me, how can I help? I was so like on cloud 10, like just overwhelmed. I couldn't even figure out how to ask for help. And for me to pause to explain to you how I needed help felt like so much more work that I'd rather just not. No, I don't need help. Yes, you do. You're not making it. No, I don't need help. Right. It was like, because I just couldn't pause long enough. So if you at these early stages can start to identify all the things, right, and then start to identify the tools that you can use right now to help you until you can bring on those resources. These are just some of the tools I leverage, and I love to always put them out there. When I started my business, I would always just I use a lot of different tools to make it seem like we had a lot more going on. Calendly, we use even for our class. And I told you guys to use this to schedule your interviews. DocuSign, you can sign documents, NDAs, contract agreements, etc. on your phone anywhere you go. Slack, communication channels with your group or your team, or even if you get interns, like especially your local universities, there's always interns you can onboard for different pieces. We'll talk about that later. Definitely leverage those resources. And you have ways of staying in constant contact with them. G Suites, if you know Google, most of y'all have Gmail addresses and you already know what's offered there. ClickUp is a project management platform that we use with our teams. Otter.ai has been my new best friend in the last 2 or 3 years. And what I do, especially in meetings with my teams, where we'll come up with our most innovative ideas, and then we'll pause and be like, did anybody write that down? Dang. And so we have Otter AI connected to our Zoom. And every time our Zoom starts, Otter starts recording and transcribing. And then therefore all of our meetings, and everyone in there is known, you don't do this without people's knowledge. So everybody in the room knows this is being recorded. And then we have our meetings transcribed. And so when we have our light bulb moments, it is captured and we're not sitting there trying to remember who said what. And so I do this a lot with my teams, even brainstorming, and even with my clients, when I'm brainstorming with my clients, so I can be present and in the moment, I'll have Otter AI recording it or transcribing it. And then I can go back through the notes and be like, okay, this, and I can kind of shoot it back at them. Like, here's our next steps, right? Fancy Hands was bae for a long time. That was my heart for a minute until I outgrew her. Fancy Hands is a virtual secretary. And so even when it came to not just business stuff, just stuff I didn't feel like being bothered with, I gave it to Fancy Hands. So at one point in time, like, for example, my cell phone provider, if I needed to call them, their customer service gave me heartburn. And so I would call Fancy Hands, and like Fancy Hands will stay on the line with them until they get a live person, and then will bring me in, and then I can handle my business. That did me love. Or Fancy Hands, I need quotes for 5 venues for this day, and they have these different requirements. They'll sit there, call, and give me my list and my spreadsheet nice and neat the way I needed it, and I can make my selection. And so it took away a lot of the mundane things that I didn't have time to do. I gave it to Fancy Hands. Things that were mission critical that needed my input, I left it here. Fax Zero, I can turn my cell phone into a fax machine. Cam Scanner, I use my cell phone to scam. Loom was also my newest, latest trick in the last couple of years, especially when I have my interns or I have teammates that I need to get information to. I can do a screen capture. And so I can sit there and be like, and it'll show my video and my screen. I'm like, okay, I need you to change this, add this, move this here, bam. 2-minute video of Loom, I get 30 minutes work of done work. 2 minutes video of Loom, I can get them to get 30 minutes to an hour worth of work that I can now move on to something else. And so those are just my play tools. This is a very, very short list of the many tools that exist, but you really got to think about your business, what your business needs, and how do you make them work for you. Bringing on, I had a friend, he's a tool junkie. Every time I saw him, and he's actually how I found out a lot about these tools. Oh, I just downloaded a new tool and I found this new app, and he spends all his time, but then like, what do you use it for? I have no clue, but it's cool. Find out how it's actually going to help you and what you need before you add on something new that's just going to frustrate you. Prototyping tools, we're going to talk about this probably next week. We did our initial round of paper prototypes. The next thing you guys are actually going to do are wireframes. And this will be the last thing that you're going to do before you hand it off to someone to actually help build. And the reason this is important is because we want you to have a more realistic, engaging way of testing with your users, but also you want a way of explaining to whoever is building your platform some key details. And what I found in the past is if you haven't stepped through that, then you don't actually know and you get frustrated. So I've had a lot of entrepreneurs get frustrated when the when the developer is asking, or whoever's helping them build their MVPs, well, what do you want here in terms of content, and what's your color scheme you want here, what kind of templates you want here, and they don't know because it's a little bit of a lot for it's a lot for them to kind of think through because they haven't. So by doing your own wireframe, you've already thought about those pieces, and even if something changes in your actual platform, you've done the thought homework, right? And so that's the part that I won't let an innovator build anything for another entrepreneur until I know they've done that thought homework, just because it makes the process so much smoother. I'm gonna pause there and ask y'all if you have any questions, because I've been going a mile a minute.
Very informative, and just doing a recap, and it's all sinking in. It's all sinking in.
Katie put a question in the chat. Outside of the tools I mentioned, what are some of your favorite tools?
You guys heard one of mine earlier with WeTransfer for large files. That's awesome and very simple. Does anyone have tools that they use in their business that help speed things up, or personal life?
I used to use Squarespace. Right now I've been playing around with Weebly. I think I like Squarespace more. That's for website templates and development.
Okay. I think we've done more Squarespace with our last around our farmers. So a lot of their platforms are built in Squarespace. Yeah.
Nice.
All right, Chris, you mentioned Mockups.
Yeah, that's what I used when I was trying to explain to the people that I'm working with now for my app.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a template that I used to show them, like, this is the idea that I had, and they took it and made it so much better. So.
Okay. Is that for mobile app design?
It could be for mobile app. Well, I used it for mobile app. I'm not, you can use it for a lot of things.
Okay. Yeah, when we get to that next week, we'll have a host of tools because I know you all are building different things in terms of what your MVP needs to be. And so I'll anything you want to add, that'd be really great in terms of a host of tools. And like I said, I always post out tools of here's some options, but you're free to use and please share if you know some other ones because some of these tools I have not looked up. You know, I mean, there's new tools popping up every day, so I'm never abreast of all of them. And so there's just so many different things that you can use and make your life so much easier in terms of helping build out, make your process easier. So let's kind of think through a few different things. Yeah, you just embedded Calendly. Yeah, it's the start, right? You gotta use the tools in front of you and you realize they kind of, because I know scheduling is a pain in the behind. So Calendly is a good one. When to Meet, I think is it called? Yeah, When to Meet is another good one that I like to use. And of course, Old Faithful. Oh goodness, what is the one that we've been using? Yes, Doodle. Yes. So Doodle, When to Meet, Calendly, those have been my go-to depending upon how many schedules we're trying to coordinate and who all needs to meet with who. It is a lot of options. And that's why I said like a lot of 63% get overwhelmed, right? So you're very correct. It can become a lot. But again, if you start out with, I need to fix problem X and only problem X, it makes it a lot easier because all of these tools do something very different. And so if you start off with the problem, just like we do with our designing for our entrepreneurs, start off with the problem. It'll lead you direct path to a solution that better fits what you need. But remember, you're not alone. We're all in this with you. And this is a journey many of us are on. So let's think about how do we start a startup, right? So when you're thinking about starting a startup, we live in the future, right? And so I love something I used to always tell my entrepreneurs and even the students I mentor, define your life forward and live it in reverse, right? There are people who have walked our paths before. They have journeyed these roads and we love to feel like we are the first ones to knock down doors, and you probably are, but there's somebody out there that have lived a similar journey. Find them, right? You might not need to know them personally, but find those stories, find those journals and stalk them cyberly, not in person. Stalk them, right? And learn about their journeys. And then learn about and see what are the different things that you can parallel on your journey to help you get to similar places, right? And if it's not just them, do some research, right? If you say, this is my end goal, and you're working backwards, if my end goal is to be here in 5 years, what do I need to be doing in 2.5 years? What do I need to be doing in a year? What do I need to be doing in 6 months, right? So you want to kind of live in that future ahead of your time. And this is not just what you're doing in terms of your business. This also speaks to your customer needs, right? If you are married to the problem and you know the needs of your customer, you will see the trends and changes before they happen. As you're constantly in constant contact with your customer and their needs, you'll start to notice when they start to get dissatisfied or a knowledge gap or opportunity that's not being met. And you add that into your product and service. And the more you stay in the center of that conversation, the more you can evolve. And your customer's like, oh man, I was just thinking about that. I'm really glad you added that, right? And so you want to grow with your customers in that capacity. You want to stay atop of what's missing in the world, write down, bounce ideas, making prototypes. Even after you launch, you're constantly making prototypes about pieces that you can add on to your business, right? Showing that to a bunch of people. Remember we talked about initially, it's 100 person rule. You should condense it for here, but you really want to kind of think about how you can talk to more people, launch, look for funding, register your company, find co-founders, business partners, etc. Iterate through your prototypes, follow up with your users, get 1,000 users, grow 5% a week, keep growing, launch again, right? You have this loop, right? And it doesn't always look cut and dry, right? You can start off here, get here, and end up back here. Or you can go all the way here and realize, nah, I got to get back here somewhere, right? This is not a seamless process. It's not a direct path. Some of the things that we will cover in this course is we'll talk about financial modeling. Like I said, that's kind of a big piece for a lot of people. Understanding how your company will make money I have actually worked with a friend of mine. He's a serial entrepreneur, and his mom has a business that he was supporting. And finally, one day he went down to visit his mom, and he wanted to take a look at her books because he couldn't quite figure out, as much as he invested in the business, why wasn't it profitable? And so he looked at the books, and essentially with what his mom had been spending and what she was charging, with the money that he was putting into her company, he was essentially paying her customers to be her customers. And he looked about a year worth of books. He was like, I've been paying my mom's customers for the past year. That's awesome. And so that's one of the things a lot of people struggle with. You launch a business and money is coming in and you're excited, but all money isn't good money, and all money isn't the same color, right? And if you don't know how much it's costing you to make that money, you really don't know what that money means. So revenue models are something that we talk a lot about. There's so many different ways to make money. And sometimes we get locked in on kind of our one and done. But when you want to think about all the different ways, so it's, if you have a product that you're selling your product can be one way of making money. Educating people about that product or service is another way of making money, right? And educating can be workshops, it can be videos, it can be YouTube, it can be blogs, it can be, right? Like the list goes on, right? If your product is something that you can patent or copyright or license, right? Then other people can make money for you without you even doing anything. And in terms of selling your product, are you selling one and done? Are you selling a subscription service, right? What is your process of getting people to come back, right? Are you customizing, or are you kind of building across the board, building one type across the board? Is your revenue model, does it also include getting sponsorships or donations, right? Do you have a shop cart, an e-commerce site? Are you selling data, right? Because if you're selling a product, but in terms of people to buy that product, they're providing you a lot of rich data. You can also turn around and sell that data to someone else. Be careful about that. That can get a gray area, but you can essentially sell some of that data. And it doesn't have to be like, creepy identifiable data, right? Like it could be very clustered, like people who live in this area have a need of these type of products, and there's a shortage of it because of this gap in supply chain. That is vital data that you can share, especially if it's an area that's growing or changing that you're working in, right? That people don't necessarily, a lot of these larger companies, they don't have that community network that you have, right? Freemium plan is kind of a big thing you see a lot of companies do. I know some investors that absolutely hate that, but the freemium idea is pretty much, as I'm getting traction, I'm going to give away certain things for free to get people in the door. And then when they get them in the door, then I'm going to find some other things to charge them with. That is a very effective idea, but sometimes you got to have enough cash to float you during that period, right? And so you'll see like Dropbox was the king of this. Dropbox got me so good on this, and I always say I love Dropbox's model. So Dropbox gave out like, you got a gig for free. Okay, cool. I'm gonna store my stuff in Dropbox. But if you add it onto another device, you get 5 more gigs. Heck yeah, I'm gonna add it onto my phone. Oh, great. And then if you do something else, you get like 10 more gigs. Oh, this is lovely. And so I think for 3 years, I had up to like 50 gigs of free Dropbox space. Then it was like, hey, your space is done. So it's going to convert back to a gig tomorrow. You need to kind of figure out what to do with this or pay $100 a year. It's like, awesome. And where exactly am I going to find 49, someplace to put 49 gigs worth of information? Thank you, Dropbox. Here's my checkbook. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but again, they had to have enough capital to float them for that 3 years, right? While they did that. And then that got so much people locked in, because we didn't have a choice, that you had to kind of stay with them, right? Or for at least that season until you figure out what to do with all that stuff. And then other players started to get in the game and you had more options. But for a minute, that was it. That's all you had in the game, right? And so, and advertising, that's the other thing that a lot of people realize. When you think about Facebook, everyone always think about Facebook as a social networking platform, which it is, meeting people, which it is. But at the end of the day, in terms of monetization, Facebook is an advertising company, right? That's how they made their money coming out the door. They sold ads. They sold, you know what I'm saying? So those advertising opportunities made a lot of money. And it's not like the creepy where you have ads floating across your page, right? But Facebook, let's sit there. And if you open something on your phone 2 days ago, you got a nice little Facebook ad on your computer. Hey, about that shoe, you know what I mean? So, but that is how they really made their money initially. And everything else was to engage you, right? But they had so many people using their platform. You're crazy not to advertise on them if you're really trying to make those dollars, right? And so those are just some of the ideas of revenue models. Because one of the things when we often get to business model canvas, how are you going to make money? People get lost, and it's like, I'm going to sell my product. Okay, yes, and how are the other ways to make money? And so I like to throw this in early to really get you thinking, what are the different opportunities? Even if you think about the products and services you use, they have multiple streams of income. So what are yours, right? And sometimes what happens to some people is the one thing that you thought was going to be your moneymaker isn't, but it might be something else you do that people want more of that. Yeah, your product and service is nice, but no one provided any education on this. And if you can like hook us up on that, yeah, I'll still buy your product and service, but I really want the training, right? And so like you want to be able to find that. And that is, you want to be able to find those opportunities, but you also want to be able to pay attention to how your streams of income, how money is coming in, how it's flowing, to really get a sense of what are the things that you're doing, that you're investing your energy and dollars in that is really making a difference. I'm going to pause there. I know, Katie, you have a lot to give back and say about in terms of starting up a business. And I kind of started doing a deep dive unintentionally, but I wanted to kind of see if you had any thoughts on the stuff I've covered so far.
So, yeah, I think that it's really important I think a lot of what you said is great, Wanda. Just really think through what your time is worth. And don't say in the beginning, well, it's okay, it doesn't cost me anything to do this, when it's just your time, because your time is valuable. And try to really think through like the money that you're getting, but also what you're actually putting into that. So for instance, if you're spending 2 hours with each person trying to figure out scheduling for a 30-minute service that you're charging, $50 for, but then you need to think about all the time that you're working with them to schedule. And maybe that's when you go ahead and you look at some of these tools that will take care of some of that and maximize it. And even if the tool cost $10 a month or something like that, it might really be worth it in terms of your time, because then if that frees you up to make extra money, then you are coming out ahead. There's a big tendency with starting entrepreneurs to be really very cautious cost-wise, and I think that that's smart. I don't think you should just sign up for everything and pay a ton of money out of the gate. But I do think that you should be very aware of where your time is going, and just know that your time is valuable. And then, yeah, with revenue models, there's a lot to think about. And it's good to just talk to people or read stories on the internet about people who've gone through the different processes that, like you want to research about affiliate stuff. Does it actually work? At what threshold does it work? And you will hear these massive success stories. You'll also hear people who are like, I wasted a ton of my time doing this, and I thought it was going to be like a big money maker for me. So but a lot of it is the way in which you approach each of these. So really just think through it, and the other thing I would say is when you're thinking through some of this stuff, don't overcommit yourself. Like if you want to do a subscription service, don't be like, oh, every month I'm going to put out like 30 different blog posts and 50 different product recommendations and this and this and this and this. And then that might be feasible in the beginning when you don't really have very many customers, but as things grow, you just totally get overwhelmed. So just really, I think, Wanda said, be realistic and honest with yourself. And I think that honesty should really follow through with this portion of things. When you're thinking about revenue models, think about like it really honestly. Like if you say that you want a donation-based business, but then you don't feel comfortable asking people for money, you don't feel comfortable putting a donation button on your website, that's probably not a viable revenue model for you. And that's okay. There are lots of people that don't feel comfortable with that. That's a whole nother topic. We can work through some of that, like some of that. But if the idea of it makes you like sweat and you're like, oh God, I can't imagine doing that, then please, please, please do not pick that as your revenue model. So just that, like, keep that honesty going with yourself. And now I'm just rambling about all sorts of little tips. So I will be quiet. Wanda, was that kind of what you were hoping that would come out of me? Okay.
Yes, that is perfect. And Katie mentioned something I want to drive home a little deeper in terms of your time. One of the things I used to do just for fun, I started with some of my friends. I love to lift weights. And so I sometimes help people who are trying to lose weight, gain muscle mass, etc., and doing it for fun. But I also wanted to know how my time was going. So every time a friend asked me to put together a fitness plan or a meal plan together, I wrote an invoice for them. And I would zero it out at the end, but I wanted them to understand and for me to remember how my time is valued, right? And so I wanted them to know how much this service costs. And so even if you are the only person for your business and you're doing a little extra stuff just because, for you, it's a good way to collect data, you always want to write that out and be very clear how, if you were not you, and if it was if you were paying someone in your business to do this, how much would that cost you? Write that down. Even if you're zeroing out that, every week you can write a blank check to yourself, right? If this is how much this would cost, right? Because you need to make that very realistic. Your time is money and it is very valuable. And so, so thank you for mentioning that, Katie. And the other thing Katie mentioned is getting into the weeds of your business and also understanding what you can outsource, right? And your business needs the best of you, not the rest of you, right? And so if you are, some people, their business are like their baby, right? And they don't want to let go of any aspect of their baby. Now I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And no one else knows my vision. It's all in my head. The problem with that is you can't be your best self at the critical pieces for your business because you're too busy being stretched thin, being all the pieces for your business, right? And so, right, someone might not have the marketing vision you have, and that's okay. And they might not do it the way you thought about it. That's okay. And they might not do some other piece of it just right. And it might be like, oh God, I cringe. That is okay, right? If it gets what you need done enough so you can kind of focus on the key pieces of your business, do that, right? Those things are really, really important. Okay, Varsha, you have a question. Where do you go about finding people to outsource to? So there's a couple things. So one of the things I always say, especially when you're starting off, interns. Interns are super hit or miss, but they are actually a good starting point. Bye, Katie. See you next Wednesday, or see you Wednesday.
Hi, everybody.
So university interns, there's always the department. So I always go to the business school and the marketing departments. And what else is it? Marketing, business, and I feel like there's one other department at the university. A lot of them have 4 credit hours, not 4, but they have credit hours that they have to take in terms of internships are part of their requirements to graduate. And so I would start there in terms of getting on with those students that they can kind of fill in some of those basic pieces for your business. And one of the things I found about sometimes bringing on interns, sometimes interns are closer to not just the problem, but some of the latest innovations in spaces you're not aware of. And so bringing them in, some of those fresh minds, they'd be like, okay, I see you doing this, but are you aware that this, and this exists as well, right? And so sometimes, if not for nothing, just keeping them around for that, right? Those fresh ideas is super helpful. Atisha, I wrote, what is the affiliate model? What do you mean affiliate model?
It was on the revenue slide. I was wondering, because I didn't know that that could be like a model. I thought it was like kind of small. So I was just curious, but I don't want to derail.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. There is so many different models, and that's kind of what this slide is to show you. I would definitely research all the ones that look viable or interesting. We could do a deeper dive into them, and I can provide more information, but there's just so many different
Right.
opportunities to make money. And that's why I say so many people get stuck on, I'm just selling this product. And it's like, but why, right? You could be a conduit for so many different things in terms of your partnerships. And that's what the affiliates are, right? If you have an affiliate who's doing work in this space, right? That is definitely one way of making money. Lisa, your question.
Yeah, she brought up another way. So yeah, so it looks like you could do it in a couple of ways.
Yep.
Is that affiliate marketing too, like that? Like
Interesting.
if they sign on with the moving company or the maid, I get a 10% or a $10 for 20.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I worked for a photography company for weddings. They specialize in weddings. But then they were kind of needing these overstressed capacity brides. It's like, I have too much to do. And they were like, well, what can we help you with? And so eventually they became a one-stop shop. You came in there and say, here's the dates to your wedding. They had the photographers, the videographers, the limo service, the makeup artists, the whatever it is that was wedding, they had affiliates. They would call in and they brought everything for your wedding. And all you did was sign on a dotted line. Now they charge a premium for it, but that premium was for convenience. And so with that, they just, because again, now their affiliates got paid directly, but that fee that they charge by kind of having that, like, hey, I'm sending you this business. And so therefore I get whatever percentage of the business I send over. For them, they're still getting their main services and businesses in terms of photography and videography, but they were also getting kickbacks by having these partnerships, right?
And doesn't that build like a trust too? The win-win for both. And
yeah. So that is definitely a model I've seen used time and time again. And again, it's not a huge piece of your business, but money is money, right? And it goes both ways, right? So if someone comes to them that's looking for a particular service, like, hey, I got a guy, right? And so, yeah, it definitely helps grows your business. One of the other things is, so I was kind of giving you an example of Dropbox. So let's talk about some of these other services. How does Instagram make money?
Also ads.
Ads.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about Kickstarter?
ooh, do they get a percentage?
Mm-hmm. Kickstarter's like, come here, crowdsource, fundraise, do what you want. We get our cut.
How does DuckDuckGo? I use that.
Oh yeah, DuckDuckGo.
How does DuckDuckGo make money?
Are they an advertiser? Or are they like Google in that way?
I'm actually trying to remember what DuckDuckGo is. It's been a minute for me.
It's
It's
like
a
the ad I
privacy
just heard it.
browser.
Are you tired of Google and Microsoft?
Yes, I forgot about them. Yeah. Yeah.
So ads, is that how they make money? Banner
Yes.
ads or something?
Bump you up on the listing or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What else? How about Farmville? How do they make money? I remember Farmville.
In-store purchases.
Oh,
Purchases.
yeah.
Yeah.
Buy those
Yeah,
coins.
I need a cow or
You
something.
can buy a cow. Coins and cows.
What is this?
Does anybody use Evernote?
No.
Okay,
I
they're
do.
kind of faded out. I used to use them a long time ago. But yeah, so how does Google make money? How about that? Besides selling your data to everybody. No, I'm just kidding. Am I? But how does Google make money?
Ding, ding, ding.
Sorry. Nerd moment.
I think they have like partnerships that they go through. Like I know YouTube, like when you go ahead and sign into Google, you can sign into Google on anything. And I think that that's a part of their like contracts that they have that people pay into. No?
The
Yeah,
single
yeah,
signer.
Actually, that's a good point. So like, yeah, Alphabet owns a ton of these sites, but you're right. A lot of these other websites that aren't under that company, they do have the sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google. And I wouldn't be shocked if they're paying to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that might be another affiliate one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me
Interesting.
go through. Oh, someone had a question. Oh, yes.
Ines.
Ines, were you just saying yes to how they make money? Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, yeah. She's traveling, and so is in transit. Okay, let me get this video up so you guys can see.
Ad manager is the easy way for businesses like yours to advertise on Hulu. Think of it. Hello people, my name is Arnav Ray and welcome to my YouTube channel. We are back with a brand new video. Today we are going to talk about revenue models. Hi there, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Arnav Ray. I'm an entrepreneur who's crazy about startups. Over the years, I've set up YouTube with topics to talk about. It helps us in identifying the monetization strategy as well as how we can generate revenue for our business. I have met quite a few entrepreneurs initially ignored the monetization model and later on struggled to get a sustainable, profitable revenue stream for their operations. Please note, you cannot run your venture through funding all the time. Beyond a certain point, funding will dry up. If you see a lot of e-commerce, web-based, mobile-based companies these days, you will see all of them are struggling with the monetization model and extremely dependent on their funding. You must keep in mind the primary source of your funds should be from your paying customers. And if you fail to do that, then you should go for funding. So let's dive in and see what does your revenue model depends on. It depends on your market, your competitor, your value proposition, your product positioning, and the cost structures. Let's look into some of the popular revenue model types. The production model. It's actually a manufacturing model that you manufacture a product and sell it for a price. Then you have the rental or leasing model. You have a property or a software or a hardware you are leasing out to people for a price. Then you have the advertising model, which typically earns your revenue through advertising channels. Then you have the commission-based model, where you earn commission for your services. Then you have the e-commerce model, which is primarily fueled by the internet payment gateways and online payments. And then you have the fee-for-service. Fee-for-service model is typically adopted by most of the services company. Here's an interesting one. This is called licensing model, where you actually license your invention or products to other companies to be paid by royalties. Then you have the retail or the markup model, where retailers, wholesalers, distributors usually mark up a price from what they have bought and sell it in the market. You also have an interesting model called auctions. We all know about auctions, right? People bid to win the product. You can also earn a substantial revenue by selling data that you have gathered on your website or through different processes in your company. It can also be a transaction enabler. If you're enabling any transaction, you actually get a transaction fee. Then you have marketplace. Marketplaces are pretty common these days, which allows vendors and buyers to meet at a platform, usually online. Here's an interesting model, which is very popular these days. It's called freemium. It's a combination of free and premium. And this is adopted by the cloud computing world as well as the SaaS world pretty rapidly. Then we have the affiliate model, which kind of you earn revenue affiliated to some other company whenever you give them affiliate sales. The subscriptions and the memberships model is also quite popular. It is very much used in the web hosting space. Then obviously for non-profit organizations like Wikipedia, you can always rely on donations. I know a lot of you are tech entrepreneurs, and for your sake, I have put down the list of possible software licensing models in this chart. Before we wrap up this video, here are some pointers you must remember. You must have a monetization model. A company can have multiple revenue streams and revenue models, really. Your customer you're selling to might not be your consumer. And revenue impacts all areas of business, including branding, sales, marketing, operations, finance. So it is extremely important for you to have a robust revenue and monetization strategy placed into your business as soon as possible. If you have any questions, please comment.
Does that answer some of your questions about the different models? Yeah, okay. I was gonna wait till we do the revenue class. I was like, since you have questions, I'll kind of throw that in there now.
Chasing that A and want to save time on proofreading.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's just helpful to kind of see it. again, we are going to have more on this. This is just kind of that introduction conversation. So we can, as we start to dive into these different pieces, you kind of know why it matters. Get back to screen share. Yeah, you're right, Atisha. It is a lot to consider. And it's a lot of different moving pieces, but don't get overwhelmed. You start with what you know, and just, I bring this to you so you are aware that you don't have just that one, right? There's multiple. We can dive more into this, but this is kind of just thinking about the business model as this is just a map of, as you kind of think through, and depending upon who you are and how you see things, this can be a little overwhelming, but I just want you to kind of think through how the business model kind of relates to each other, the pieces, and how a lot of the pieces are connected. And so it's just more of helping you think through all the different pieces that make your business work. And we won't go into a whole lot of detail. I show this now just so you can kind of think of the different, this is more of a deeper dive into the business model revenue pieces that we kind of talked about. So the revenue models, you can kind of see all the options here and how that connects to the larger business model and your markets, right? So how you make money, who you're selling is to, the business plan or a business case, kind of, so all the things that we've been working on, the customer description, the product description, etc. And so, like I said, this is more for example purposes. So, more about the financials we'll go into fixed and variable costs. This is one of the things I was kind of giving an example of when I talked about my friend who realized he was paying his mom's customer. By understanding like how much time you're spending, how much resources that you're using. And we'll go through some examples, even like stuff like baking, right? Like how much does that flour cost? How many, pies can you get out of that bag of flour, right? All those things add up into how much it costs you, right? And knowing the understanding of that, of what it's going to cost. Sometimes we've had entrepreneurs discover going through stuff like this, their business doesn't work because it costs more to deliver that product or service than they can actually make money on, right? And that's good to know, right? It might be a little heartbreaking, but it's good to know before you invest a lot of resources to realize at the moment the way you're envisioning it is not practical. So you either need to pivot or figure out another way of delivering that product or service. Lisa, did you have a question? No, okay. More on this, we'll go to next time. And so same thing in terms of understanding what your money looks like, your fixed costs, revenue, break even point, all these things will go into a deeper dive later. I just put them here so we have that first initial pass. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit more about the business model canvas. And so the business model canvas is normally like this. And we're going to talk about two. So they have evolved. So the business model canvas is the OG. And so since then, the lean model canvas has come onto the scene, and we're going to spend some time on that as well. But I like to start off with the original, just because there's some little key points about it. So the business model canvas are 9 different components. And even though it's laid out like this, you always start at the value proposition. So what are customers' problems? Which one of our customers' problems are we helping to solve? So going through customer discovery, sometimes you realize your customers have multiple problems and you can't solve them all, right? But it might be one with this first, and then you might be able to solve them all eventually. But at the moment, when you're starting this business, it is the goal to solve one problem, right? And so you want to be able to think through what is that, right? What are the customer needs are we satisfying, right? So sometimes the customer have a problem and sometimes they just have a need, right? And so I like this template because it kind of has a lot of different questions to kind of think about our customers, right? And putting ourselves in our customers' shoes. So value proposition, we're going to have a whole session on that. Is really important, because the thing that, even though we know what the problem and need is, we have to then ask of ourselves and the problem, what value are we bringing to our customer, right? Is it, are you fixing, are you providing a gain, right? Are you fixing a pain, right? Are you alleviating something for them? Are you making them feel good, right? And so we'll talk about value, right? But everything has a value. Everything we engage with, everything we use has a value. And understanding what value you're providing to your customer helps you better situate yourself in terms of your product or service, right? And then we jump over to 2, the customer segment, right? And 1 and 2, sometimes you'll see them like interchangeably, and I'm not even sure why they set up the canvas like this, but it always go hand in hand. The value ties to the customer. And remember when we did our stakeholder analysis, you might have more than one customer. So in column 1, you might have, I'm solving the problem for this customer in column 2. But say, for example, you have a 2-part customer. You have a parent and a kid. The kid is the end user who's a customer, but the parent is the purchaser who's also the customer. And so you're solving a problem and a need for both parent and kid. And so you want to list those separately, right? This problem goes to this customer, and this need goes to this customer, right? And so you want to be very clear in terms of what value you're delivering for who, right? And then you want to kind of think about, well, how am I going to do it? Through which channels do our customer segments want to be reached, right? So how are you connecting with your customers? How are you providing your that value that you're promising, right? And so is it through email? Is it through web? Is it social media? Are you cold calling? What is the ways that you're going to provide that value? And then we go into 4. What type of relationship does each customer segment expect us to establish, right? Is this going to be a B2B model, right? Where I don't actually interface with my customer. In terms of selling my product, I sell to another business. So if I sell a widget, right, that goes into a computer that my customer is then using, then that relationship is a business to business model, right? Where I'm still thinking about that end user, but I don't actually have any interfacings with them, right? And so you want to kind of think about, what does the relationship look like for your customer? So I'm providing a value, right, to a specific customer, and I have a particular kind of relationship to them, and I interact with them. I have channels of how I get information to them, and I have a particular relationship with them. And so this side of the canvas is a whole undertaking on its own. And this is kind of a lot of the things that we have been doing. It was helping setting you up for this, right? You were learning value by understanding their problems and needs. You went through your empathy where you learned who your customers, right? And then by interviewing, you understood what channels your customers actually utilize. And then you learn what the best ways to foster relationship with your customer. This side is what design thinking set us up for. And then we move over, and some of these, they do it differently. Sometimes people go into revenue, but this one shows activities is next, and that's fine. And key activities can be a little tricky, and we're going to talk about that more. But when you think about key activities, you have to think about, what is the thing that my business does that if I don't do, if this wasn't a part or this was removed, then I have no business, right? And so see, if you think about, I'm a software company, right? And I have no way of creating programs, then I have no key activities, right? And so you want to kind of think about, like, what are the things, right, that are key to you being able to deliver the value that you're providing, right? And so, Lisa, if you had the services that you provide, but you had no way, say you lived in Alaska and your businesses are here in Florida, and you create these great relationships and you understand their value, you know your customer segment, and it's like, great, someone should come in your house and help you out. It's like, when can you be here? Oh, I'm not going to be there. Well, who's going to do it? Oh, I don't know. Well, how's it going to get done? Oh, don't know that either. That is a key activity for you, right? And so that becomes very problematic if you're not there, or someone from your business cannot actually do the functionings of your business. And then you want to think about the key resources, right? So what are the things that your business heavily relies on? Some of it can be things like licenses, right? If you have a brick and mortar business and you don't have a permit to operate that business, then you have no business, right? And so you think about when it comes to key, there's activities that your business do and there's resources that your business leverage. But when you think about the key ones, these are the ones, if this does not exist, or if I do not have access, my business comes to a screeching halt, right? And what are those things? And there don't have to be a lot, but you need to be able to identify them, right? So what are those key activities and resources? And the same thing, the key partners, right? Say if I'm a baker, right? And my business relies on my flour distributor. If I don't have a flour distributor, then I don't have anything to bake with, right? And so, and I use kind of those tangible examples, but you can kind of think about all the businesses that you interfaces in that you can think about that relies on that relies on other partnerships to get done, right? One of my biggest pet peeves is Trader Joe's. I love shopping at Trader Joe's just because they're convenient. My pet peeve about Trader Joe's, my favorite item is always out of stock because there's always some problem with their distributor. So like my husband loves cookie butter and it's like, you can't find cookie butter for anything because their glass distributor had some kind of problem. It's like the glass distributor, can't y'all find somebody else to make glass? Nope. So you're just not gonna get cookie butter for the next 2 months. So I'm like, seriously? Yeah. As many glass distributors out there? Yeah, nope. Our glass distributor has some shortages. It's like, you kidding me, right? And so like for them, it'll halt production on that one product because that key partner has some kind of disruption in their business. So you got to think about who are those key partners for you. And we talked a little bit about revenue stream, but for what value are your customers willing to pay for, right? So when we talked about like the whole scheme is I'm promising to deliver value to this key person, right? Using these channels, leveraging this type of relationship, right? Doing these key activities, providing these, using these key resources, working with these key partners. And because of that, they're willing to pay dollars, right? And so that's kind of how you want to kind of think about it all in totality. But then when you get that, how much does it cost you? What's the most important cost inherent to our business model, right? There's some little costs here and there that we're all gonna have to pay, but what are some of those main costs that, you know, if these costs are not addressed, then, you know, we really don't have a good understanding of our business, right? And so you want to kind of think about your business model kind of in that capacity, all the different components, right? And the thing is, by the time we're done, I want you, by the time you finish this class, this business and every other business idea you have I want you to rapidly be able to iterate through all of these 9 steps. Like, oh man, I just saw a water bottle. Oh, this delivers value X way. And you know what, customers will really love this. And you should be able to think through the whole process, right? And I want you guys to be so comfortable with it that you can iterate through it relatively easy for this business and the next. Any questions on this so far? Questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I feel like my gardeners could be a partner / supplier because if they don't post anything, it literally is no point to the site.
Yeah.
But they're also my customer.
Yes. And so you'll see that. You'll see there are times there's overlap and then it becomes hard. Where do I put this person? Sometimes some of our groups fit in multiple places, right? Okay. And so sometimes our customer also is a partner, right? And so it really just depends on the supply of your business, the supply chain process of your business. And so those are things that you're going to discover. And this is what makes business so hard to teach, right? Because everybody's business is different. And even when your businesses seem just alike, there's always some nuance of your business that's unlike someone else's business. And when by being able to capitalize on that is what gives you market opportunity, but also it makes it challenging because there is no one answer into how best to do this to serve you in your business, right? And so you can teach business skills, but you learn business trial by error. You learn what works best for your customers, your product, your service for you. trial by fire, right? And so it's a lot of those things you don't know until you test, right? But that's a very good question. So anybody have another question before I switch? No question? All right. So I'm gonna stop sharing and go to a video of someone who can say it better than I can.
I guess I do have a little question
Sure.
about revenue, not so much revenue, but like income or earning. Like if our clients tell us and want to pay us more, like in my service industry, is that like a no-brainer? Like I should up my prices, or is that just a one-off that a few times some people are like, that's too cheap. Here, let me give you more.
That's something you want to test before you up your prices, right? Because then when you start to have questions like this, you take the questions back to your customers.
Well, that's what it just happened again. Like, a client said, no, that's not too,
No, you test your customers. So some things I've seen businesses do, they take prices off their websites, right? And then they just ask their customers, how much would you pay for the service, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one way of testing. You can do surveys. You can test. There's different ways you can start to test ideas on your customer before you actually do a major overhaul or change
to commit to one thing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at this.
At a startup is, how is your company going to be organized? And what we now know is the most efficient way to think about all the pieces, just all the parts, is by a business model. And so the next question is, okay, Steve, you just told me to think about a business model, but what is a business model? What are all the pieces? Well, let's take a look. And a business model is how a company creates value for itself while delivering products or services for its customers. Now, if you think about it, in the old days, we think about how to organize a company around functional organizations. We think, no, a company is about its sales department or its engineering department, and you would draw an org chart. But now we're going to draw a very different diagram. We're going to draw a diagram how to think about all the pieces of a business. And so let's take a look at these 9 boxes. 9 boxes to describe any company from the world's largest to a 2-person startup starting in your parents' garage. Let's take a look at the first piece called the value proposition. The value proposition answers the question, what are you building and for who? The value proposition says, hey, it's not about your idea or product, it's about solving a problem or a need for a customer. That is, what pain are you solving? What gain are you creating? And more importantly, who are your customers? Now, value proposition is a fancy word for what product or service are you building. This is where you normally would list all your features and here's all the speeds and feeds and benefits and whatever, but we're really going to be asking a different question than might have been used to. It's not all about your technology. Your technology is just part of the value proposition. Customers really don't care about your technology. The customers are trying to solve a problem or fulfill a need. By the way, we'll be talking about this through multiple lectures. The difference between a problem and a need is, a problem is, I have an accounting problem, or I want to use a word processor. And those types of products solve problems. But there are other things that human beings do, like I want to be entertained, or I want to have a date. Those are some basic hardwired social needs. Or I want to communicate with my friends, like Facebook or Twitter. Those are needs. Needs are different than problems. And by the way, if you could find products that solve needs, your total available market, as you'll see later, is huge compared to I solve specific problems. So the next thing is, who are my customers? Who are they and why would they buy? And as you'll hear a number of times, your customers do not exist to buy, you exist for them. And what you're going to do by getting out of the building is figuring out all their geographic, social characteristics, demographics, such that you actually could draw and put up a picture of on your wall of who the archetype is or who the persona is of your customer. And it turns out that in most startups, you might have more than one or two or three types of customer archetypes and personas, but you need to understand them in detail. And there is no possible way you could have anything but a hypothesis on day one of who they are.
Yay, guess what we already did? Our personas, yay. Okay, I'll shut up.
The next is channels. How does your product over here get to your customers over here? And we use distribution channels to do that. Now, what's really interesting is pre-1990s, the only channels to get to a customer was a physical channel. That is, you went to a store, you had salespeople, there was physical distribution. But since the mid-1990s, in the last couple of decades, we now have virtual channels, the web, mobile, cloud. And so distribution channels, the first question you want to ask is, how will I be selling and how will I be distributing my products? Are they through physical channels, or are they web mobile? Or given today, almost every physical channel also has a web presence. What is the relationship of how your product gets from your company to the customers? Customer relationships is kind of the fourth piece. And customer relationships has a really interesting interaction with these other three pieces. It basically says, how do I get customers? How do I keep them? And how do I grow them? And just like thinking about distribution channels, these are very different for web mobile than they are for physical channels. But visually, they kind of look like this double-sided funnel. So let's just take a look at quickly a web example. In getting customers, you're going to be worrying about how do I acquire them? That is, how do I get them even to my website? How do I activate them? That is, how do I make them do something? And then later on, we'll see after I got them, how do I keep them around? That is, how do I not lose them through attrition and churn? And then what can I do once I have customers to make them spend more money or use my product even more? And so one of the things we'll be thinking about is, how do I get, keep, and grow customers? And just like every other step, you might have hypotheses on day one, but you're only going to figure this out when you're out of the building. The next thing is revenue streams. How do you actually make money from your product and service being sold to customer segments? You know, revenue streams basically ask the question, what value is the customer paying for? And it actually has you think about, what's the strategy of how I'm going to capture that value? Is it I'm going to just have a direct sale and it's a transaction based on price? Is it a freemium model where I'm going to give away the product for free and hope that some portion convert later? Is it a license or subscription model? That revenue model is different than the pricing tactics. That is, what is the dollar or pound amount or euro amount that I'm going to be charging? Again, the only way to figure this out is being able to interact with tens or hundreds or thousands of customers till you finally understand what the right revenue stream and revenue model is. Next piece you want to think about is, what are the key resources? What do you need to make the business model work? What assets are important? And what's an example of an asset in a key resource? Well, finance. Do you need capital? Do you need a line of credit? Some assets and resources are physical. Do you need physical plant, like a manufacturing line? Do you need specialized machines? Do you need vans and for delivery? Do you need cars? Is there something else you need? Is there intellectual property you need? Is there patents you need to acquire or protect? Do you need to acquire customer lists? Or is it just that you need to get great people, great software programmers in a specific area, or great hardware designers, or great manufacturing people? And then finally, again, the interaction between intellectual and human capital that's another key resource. What specifically do you need to do to keep these people, and who are they? The next piece is, who are your key partners and suppliers? And partnerships are kind of interesting, is we need to ask ourselves, before what's the deal, is what exactly are we acquiring from partners? And also, what activities are they going to perform and when? And this is where startups sometimes make a mistake of thinking, well, large companies do partnerships. I guess I need those too on day one. Turns out the types of partnerships you need in year 1 are certainly not the ones you're going to need in year 3 or 5 or 10. And the types of partnerships could be strategic alliances, joint ventures, just regular suppliers and buyers. And so you need to be thinking through who they are and actually getting out of the building and testing them. Next are key activities. What's the most important things you need to do for the business to make the business model work? Are you in the production business? Are you making something? Or are you in the problem solving business, like you're doing consulting or engineering? Or are you managing supply chains? What are the key activities you need to become expert at? And then finally, all this adds up on the left-hand side over here to cost. What are the costs and expenses to operate the business model? One of the interesting things about cost is it's not just the obvious ones like people or buildings or materials. What you're really going to be asking are, what are the entire costs to operate our business model? And so you want to think about what are the most important costs you need to worry about? What are the most expensive resources you're going to need to pay for? And what key activities are the most expensive? And then you want to ask the typical accounting things. What are fixed costs? What are variable costs? Are there economies of scale? And you want to start getting a good handle on what it is that will end up costing you money to run your business.
All right. I know that probably felt redundant because I just kind of went through it all at the same time, but I wanted to really drive it home. And that was the video by Steve Blanks, and I will share with you a video series. He is kind of where a lot of this information comes from. He is what made the business model canvas popular, and created the instruction models that a lot of these lean startups have been based upon. But I want to get your thoughts for a second. What are your thoughts on this so far? Thoughts?
It seems really methodical, which I like, because it's not, it's like taking theory, right? And now we're getting into the real concrete case, that almost like step 1, step 2, step 3. Like we were doing that before, but now it's like, okay, you've thought about your customer, you've gotten, your, what's the word? Your hypothesis, and now it's literally nuts and bolts, which is nice.
Okay. I've had entrepreneurs that felt the opposite. It was like, oh, this is making me think too much. Can I just start?
Really?
And I'm like, you can just start your business. And it's like, I had someone say, it don't take all that. You just start and see what happens. That's one approach. But yeah, you're right. This is very much, if your business succeed or fail, you should know exactly why, right? At any stage. I mean, crazy stuff, you can do all of this and still fail because the market is so unpredictable. But at least you know where it's failing and why it's failing. And if you're making money, I have also had the opposite. I've had entrepreneurs who went through this and didn't pay attention. It's like, we're making money, but I don't know what any of it means. And I'm scared to spend any of it because I don't understand what's happening, right? And that can happen too. You can be very successful, but you don't know why. And if something changes and you stop being successful, you don't know what to fix because you don't know what broke, because you never knew why it worked in the first place, right? As an engineer, I can't tell you how many times someone has brought me on board to fix something. And I don't know how I fixed it, but it worked, especially as a programmer. You don't know what happened. What'd you do? Yes, it worked. You know what I mean? And so that's a problem, because if it breaks again, you can't really recreate the problem, right? And so that's kind of the big thing about your business. By breaking it down into these pieces, you should understand your business better than anybody else and all the different moving parts and dynamics. And so you know how to tweak all the pieces as you grow, right? And you're right, Varsha, it helps organize aspects of your startup to take it from idea to business. And I feel like it makes it easier to take those initial steps because you're not guessing. So it doesn't feel like I'm doing this, but I don't know what you know exactly, because by the time you're launching, you have definitely talked to enough people that you should be more than confident about what your business is, why you're doing it, what's the problem you're solving, who's your customer, all the things. And you notice the first half of the business model canvas is everything that we've spent the last 6 weeks on, but now we're putting it in the language. We're using the ontology of the business segment. So we called it customer discovery and getting to know our customers and empathy. Now it's just your customer segment, right? Value proposition, that was understanding our problem, understanding their needs, right? And so this is giving you the language. So when you talk to people in this space, you can speak the speak, but you have done a deeper dive into it in a way that makes sense to you. Any other questions? All right, I apologize. I know these videos feel long and redundant, but it helps drive this home. And it makes it easier as we go through the pieces, because then you don't feel kind of lost. And I want to have it so you can refer back to this video, these videos at any time. So one more short video, and then we should be almost wrapping it up.
It's basically like 6-minute abs, except it's leaner, it's faster, and it's about product development and not ab development. The lean startup framework, and being lean, is the de facto framework that startups today use to test and grow their startup businesses. So the term lean as you know it comes from this book, and is written by a man named Eric Ries. The name actually comes from lean manufacturing, something that Toyota did. Basically meant that they tried to make a very simplified process of manufacturing. The lean startup version obviously is for startups. Now, what is the book all about? It's about a framework and a way of thinking that can mitigate your risks going forward as you pursue your startup, and increase the likelihood of finding an idea or a feature or a product that sticks. Now, the first thing that Lean wants you to know is that when you go out there and launch your business idea, you're launching into 100% unknown, absolute uncertainty. Now, you might think, well, I have talked to my mom about this idea. She said it was great. Also, my best friend said it was great. And I read Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. Now, this is where the vast majority of people are wrong, and it's the first lesson we learned from Lean. In order to know whether or not your idea is any good, you have to get out there and test it, get out of the building, as they call it. If you're just sitting here right now thinking about your idea in your head, it's just that, it's just your head. Even if you think you know your customers, know your market, and you know how they're going to respond, you actually don't. You do not know for a fact. When we're in the shower, when we're thinking about our idea, boy, does it sound brilliant. But the reality is that most of our ideas are actually terrible. What the great Eric Ries is actually trying to say is that the only way an idea can improve and gain legs is by achieving what we call validated learning. Validated learning is learning that we know is true because we've tested it, whereas learning itself, we don't know if it's true because it's not tested. You can research all day long, reading primary and secondary reports, but how do you know for 100% fact whether or not someone in a buying type situation is going to buy what you're going to try to sell? Now, the best way of getting that validated learning that we so crave in the Lean Startup Framework is by building MVP experiments, which are basically miniature versions of your first product that we push out rapidly with a minimum amount of time and effort just to see how customers react. Why is it that we have to do it quickly? Well, because when you run an MVP experiment, there's really only one of two things that can happen. One, your idea is validated and you get some really great information about how to improve it. Or two, it just straight up fails and you find out that no, people are not interested in your product, at least in this current version. So if you spend a month making an MVP, you push it out there and you find out that nobody actually wants what you're trying to sell, it took you a month to figure that out. That's one data point, basically. But if you took a week to make an MVP, you could have tested 4 different ideas within the same time frame that it took you to test that first one. More tests means more data, which means more validated learning. Now, because it's only that binary outcome, you either succeed or you fail, you might as well fail as quickly as you can, because any time spent up until that point that wasn't absolutely necessary was entirely a waste of time. Hence why we call it lean. We cut out everything that is not necessary in order to figure out whether or not our idea is any good. It's a way of minimizing the effort, resources, and time it takes to figure out whether or not your product should even be built in the first place. And the motto is, and I love this, stop building things that people do not want. For those of you out there that knew Lean, well, that was a refresher. And if you didn't know Lean, look how much time I just saved you.
All right. More of driving home the same point? Have I bored you to death with reiterating the same thing over and over and over again? All right, are we getting there though? But we feeling like this is, I wanted you to understand the value of it, how to use it, how we will use it. So when we dive in, you're thinking about this from the perspective of your business and how this can help your business and help grow you and get you closer to your end goal. And so all of this is just kind of a uniform effort of making sure by the time you're in, and it's two things there, like you said, you can talk to lots of people and you can, and not to say you have to wait till you talk to all the people before you launch, right? You test, you build, right? You learn, right? You can launch that part of your business. You test, build another part, learn, launch that part of your business, right? And so that's a great part of the MVP. You're finding that mission critical piece to launch, and then you're constantly launching on, right? And you're adding on into your business looks like you originally envisioned it. But every piece of it, you know how it works in isolation, and you know when it works and when it doesn't and what needs to be fixed and changed, right? And so this is the whole purpose of Lean. It gives you that opportunity to iterate quickly through all the different pieces of your business. Questions? It's a lot to chew on. Don't worry, not expecting you to soak it all in now. This is, like I said, just kind of bringing you up to speed. And then the next, the rest of the class, majority of it, is going to be focusing. We're gonna go through each of these pieces, each of the boxes. We're gonna spend most of our time are initially kind of understanding that value proposition. Customer segments, we don't have to dig that deep on because we've already done that. So you already know your customer segments. Channels and relationship, we'll go over. This piece, I'm gonna show you guys the Lean Canvas model where some of these pieces will change depending upon where you are in your business, because some of this you don't know yet. And so we're gonna change how we look at the canvas that makes sense for where you are right now. But I wanted you to have this as your business grow. This is the piece that you wanna go. One of the things is gonna be in terms of your homework assignment is you're gonna iterate through this. And so I want you, well, not today, you won't have homework today because I want you guys to kind of finish up on your, it was two things you were supposed to submit. Last week was your statements, kind of your 1 or 2 line sentences about that we talked about what, that summary statement of your business and your prototype. And so we want to make sure all those things are in and everyone's good, because we're going to use that. And especially as we get in speakers, one of the things the speakers and mentors always ask, well, what are they working on? And so we want to be able to circulate that information in terms of here are the entrepreneurs and here's the spaces that they're in. And so that is going to be very important that we get that information. And so the business model canvas, like I said, we're going to dissect that and we're going to do a deeper dive into other aspects of building out your business. So I wanted you guys to have this to get us started. Any questions? Y'all feeling good? Did I throw too much at you? Did I talk too long? Normally we're doing breakout groups and y'all kind of doing a whole lot movement. So this was a true lecture style. I know we don't do a lot of this. Unfortunately, this piece of it does involve a lot more of this, but don't worry, we'll get you back in the breakout rooms once we kind of get a little more under your belt. All righty. Well, I think that is, I'm gonna give you back 5 minutes of your time. So we're gonna hop off and you get 5 minutes back to catch up on anything that needs to be done. I don't know how much you can do in 5 minutes, but some of you said you were done and just had to submit. So that's 5 minutes to submit your prototypes if they were not submitted already. And I will see you all on Wednesday.
Thank you again, Wanda. You have a great one.
Good night.
Yes. Night.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.